If you haven't registered for Connect yet, you're nuts. Time is running out. Seats are running out. Click the Connect icon in your PioneerX pharmacy software, register today, and transform your pharmacy this June at Catalyst Connect.
What does a pharmacist do? Well, most people might answer that a pharmacist dispenses the medications that my doctor prescribes. Now, I work with a ton of great pharmacists, and one thing that I don't generally see is excitement about pills in a vial. And this is probably because pharmacists have been trained to do so much more. So what can you get excited about in your community? To find out, let's go beyond the scripts. Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Scripts. I'm your host, Will Tuft with Pioneer RX. Today, we're bringing in something a little bit different. We have two guests joining us. So welcome to Kathy Campbell from Medicap Pharmacy in Owasso, Oklahoma, as well as Bradley Davie, who's joining us from the InBody company, the CES award-winning smart body composition scales that you may have seen. Thank you guys for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Will.
So where are you guys joining us from, Bradley?
I am in Southern California, where it's quite rainy these days.
Awesome. And Owasso, Oklahoma, surprisingly enough, I'm very familiar with. I actually have family in Claremore, not far from you.
Yep, I've been stomping around this ground for a long time. So it's north of Tulsa. It's a suburb of Tulsa. It actually pulls all the way up from Kansas area and funnels down towards Tulsa. And I've been a practicing pharmacist in Owasso since 1992, so I'm 31 years in, and I've owned my Medicap pharmacy. My husband and I have owned Medicap Pharmacy since 2001. So I've been a small business owner. I not jokingly say this business owns me. I don't own it. And so I'm always trying to make it work and take care of my community and have them have great lives. And what I know is health is foundational to that. So I utilize my skills and resources to help provide that.
Yeah. So Owasso is a kind of an interesting animal in that it looks to be a really, really, really big, small town because the population is very small. You have like 40,000 people there, but you have a lot of the bigger staples that larger cities may have, like a Best Buy and things like that, that generally a town with that kind of population doesn't have. But I guess because you do pull from such that large regional area of rural support there.
Yeah, it's a very interesting beast, and I've seen it change a lot in 31 years, even though I kind of, I've been in the pharmacy counting medicines and taking care of people, so I'm not out in it as much. But what's really been interesting is when I opened my pharmacy in 2001, after that, within a very short amount of time, 14 new pharmacies opened and all the chains came in.
Wow.
All the chains came in a big way because we really had that explosive growth that's happened over the last 20 years. And like I said, there is quite a pull, and we've always had, and I've always taken care of American Airlines base here, the maintenance base. So we've always had a little bit higher socioeconomic. So that's always kind of played in it too. And so it's a great place to have been able to have a practice and to be able to support now 4 generations of patients. And that is actually part of the story with regard to the InBody. I have been aging along with my patients as well. I started when I was 25, and you may do the math. I'm 56 now, but all my patients are too. And so I wanted them to age well, as I did myself, and that's part of what had me pull the trigger when I was looking at new technologies to be able to provide new products to do that.
Yeah, so definitely I think most of our listeners have probably encountered you in various trade shows, other podcasts, TED Talks. You've definitely been very visible in recent years, kind of talking about that journey and concentrating on healthy living, kind of packaged as weight loss, right?
Marketed as weight loss, but I've always viewed my role as a pharmacist is to optimize and monitor therapeutic outcomes. If you had plugged me into a hospital, that's what I would have done. If you had plugged me into the VA, that's what I've done. I'd been right there with a doctor who gave me a diagnosis, and it was up to me, the clinical pharmacist, all pharmacists are clinical, to determine the best therapy and then make sure that stuff works. And I just never stopped doing that. And so as I kept seeing patients challenged with different things as we went along, it just occurred to me that they didn't have good basic foundational function to begin with. And when you don't have that, the drugs don't even work well without that as a component. So most drugs are only approved as an adjunct to diet and exercise. So in this health journey for my patients and myself, I started focusing on the other metabolic drivers of function and looking for ways to monitor it, looking for ways to optimize it, learning for ways to empower the patient on their journey. And I just ended up at the same time having the same financial crisis that all of my peers have had, where how do you be a pharmacy and not fill prescriptions? Because the business model of filling prescriptions was quickly going out of my control. I had no control on the margin. So I decided I was going to help patients not need medications, and they're going to pay me to do that. Now, I'm not against medications. I'm actually the expert in that. But I am against patients needing them, okay? And so I feel that there is a very untapped market for that kind of a product, especially for somebody who can navigate not only the biochemistry of basic nutrition, but pharmaceuticals. That's where we have a viewpoint and an education that literally nobody else in medicine has. Doctors don't have it to the degree we have it. And what I do know is we can do nutrition, but nutritionists, and I have a lot of colleagues that are nutritionists, they can't do pharmaceuticals, and so I feel like we as pharmacists are needed in that space to be able to help navigate all those biochemistries. So I just keep talking. I won't shut up about it. So that's where I'm at.
No, that's perfect. So, it does seem like we see so many of those kind of reoccurring themes of functional medicine and lifestyle coaching, but it's really hard to know if you've put points up on the board if you don't have that measured success and that baseline. So I guess that's where the InBody comes in. Bradley, can you tell me a little bit about just kind of the elevator pitch, what InBody provides to a pharmacy, a gym, really anybody who's implementing that technology?
Absolutely. Yeah. To play off what you were saying, it's a very popular technology in functional medicine, in direct primary care, and a lot of applications. And even my experience coming upon the technology was over a decade ago. I started in exercise science and health leadership and coaching, and with a fascination about energy and metabolism and what makes people tick, so to help them transform. And this was a very unique lens for me to facilitate that transformation and actually see what was happening inside of them. And then I actually ended up coming to work with InBody about 6 years ago and helping other businesses implement this. So, independent pharmacies are definitely a blossoming industry for us, where they're bringing in our body composition technology. We also have blood pressure monitors, height stenometers. So we have an ecosystem of tools that can be implemented with a software solution to collect all that data. And if you want to kind of talk nerdy about it, we could pull all that data and put it into a solution like Pioneer RX, so it's seen side by side with other types of data that a pharmacist might be interested in. So in a simple sense, with the body composition analyzer, the one that Kathy has there behind her, it's a scale that you would step up onto and with bare feet, and then hold on to the handlebars, and in under a minute, it's going to send some small, safe currents through your body's water, using the minerals and electrolytes to conduct that. And the form of the technology is called bioelectrical impedance, and prints out a full-page report of how much muscle, water, body fat you have inside of you. And all that information can be used to track that progress in someone's journey along the way. So it's a super interesting and effective tool to be used in a pharmacy. It's not new for people to be using in a health coaching capacity alongside of many different modalities. I think it is new for pharmacies to think about implementing it, and to Kathy's claim, being able to see that information alongside of somebody's diet or exercise and pharmaceuticals is super powerful to be able to implement.
Yeah, it's one of those pieces of technology. It's one of those kind of pieces of the puzzle that once you see it snapped in, you're like, why wasn't that always here? I went and got a pair of boots recently at the Red Wing store, and I was interacting with technology that, took like scans and did all kinds of interesting things to tell me about, that aspect of my health. And it really seems like pairing, that same technology with that clinical knowledge and that coaching aspect of weight loss only makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's happened in top hospitals, clinics, fitness centers. A lot of dietitians are using it. I'd say the majority of professional sporting teams use the technology. Lots of clinical research is done with the technology. So it's something that everybody can gather some insight from, and it actually helps to bridge gaps within communities and facilitate conversations with other practitioners as well. I'd be interested if Kathy, you leveraged it to help facilitate communication with other people in your community, other practitioners or coaches or anything like that.
Oh, a little bit. I mean, I can speak about this all day. My thing is empowering the individual to understand their own machine, right? Because to me, that's where long-term outcomes lie. They don't lie in the prescription, but they lie in the management of the machine. And so one of the things I do is it's a powerful tool for people to understand if I do this, then this happens, and we can measure and monitor that. I have a lot of, where I tend to interact with a lot of professionals is not so much the physicians, because to be honest, standard medicine is not looking at this. They're still looking at the scale weight and then creating shame or blame off of BMI, right? And BMI just does not tell the tale. It actually is I think, such a poor measurement that it is almost abusive in the situation, because you never want to lose weight at the expense of muscle, because muscle drives all metabolic function. And the sickest people I see are normal weight, middle-aged women who have starved their whole life. And then I do see this used, believe it or not, in schools. I have a lot of athletes from the schools who are really trying to do something specific with their bodies, and they want feedback. They want to measure what they're doing and the results of that. So that's been really fun. Of course, some of the gym memberships and people that are really working on that, they actually appreciate the information. But the biggest thing is helping the patient identify if what they're doing is what they want to continue to do. And that is, to me, where long-term health actually lies. And what you have to realize is we're not static beings. We're not static lives, because you can go perfect in one direction, and then life happens, a pandemic happens, a birth happens, an accident happens, a call from your boss happens, and boom, you can see the body having to flex for that. And so if I can teach people how to do that and just have them honor their body's survival within those mechanisms and support it appropriately, that's where I've been able to get long-term outcomes. And this machine's been critical in helping to measure and monitor that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of metrics that you're able to look at, obviously, outside of just weight. And I think when you look at those different metrics, it tells a much different story of what's going on with that patient. Have you found that, given this feedback, I'm going to coach a little bit differently? Maybe it's not necessarily problem A, maybe it's, you can focus on solution B instead and drive results faster than if you're just looking at the scale itself. So, do you have any examples of maybe how you've been able to, maybe a patient you're able to steer one direction or another, based on all of those metrics?
Absolutely. It happens all day, every day.
all day, every day. But you're exactly right. And, I have some of my peers that have been irritated at me for not sharing more of this process. And the reality is I've been trying to figure out what I'm doing the last 5 years, right? But to give you an example, I had a 78, 80-year-old woman who had she's been debilitated with back pain for decades. And she came to do the program, and she was doing great on it. She was really doing great. She loved the food. She actually grew up foraging. So she loved eating all these vegetables. She loved eating the Mediterranean, whatever we're doing. And she was assuring me she was eating it all. So one day she stepped up on the machine, and she had lost a pound overtly, but her composition went wonky. She had lost 3 pounds of muscle and had gained like 4 pounds of fat.
Okay, not ideal.
Not at all ideal, especially at 78 years old, because the fastest way to the nursing home is no muscle. Mm-hmm. Either that or too many medications or not enough food, or, those are the big drivers. But for her, I saw that, and it was a super red flag. What would have had her lose that muscle and gain that fat? And if I was just looking at the weight, I would not have had that kind of alert, okay? But when I saw that shift in composition, I tried not to freak out. And I just started asking her, did you eat all the food? She goes, oh, yeah, I love the food, love the food. And then I said, has there been any stress? And she kind of flinched. And she said, well, my son had 2 heart attacks last week. Okay, so what I know about stress is it produces these chemicals when you're stressed. And trust me, I hate that word because it's such a bucket. But it produces these chemicals like cortisone and adrenaline, and you tend to do things, your body has to do things to survive that. But the side effect of cortisone, if all pharmacists go and pull out the package insert, is loss of muscle, gain of fat. So I was able to coach her in almost a crisis situation, how to mitigate that stress. I mean, you just have to support yourself when you're in those times, right? I couldn't necessarily change the fact that her mama brain was on alert. Her mama brain was very threatened by what had occurred. But I could reinforce, I need you to make sure you're sleeping. I need you to make sure you're eating well and taking good care of yourself because of this component. And that's one of the pieces of the puzzle nobody really looks at. But I could only really assess that because I saw that big shift in her physiology with regard to composition.
Interesting. Yeah, one of the other things I saw was the InBody can measure the intracellular as well as the extracellular water, and that water retention can also paint such a different story because that can make your weight fluctuate drastically. So I think kind of looking at that specifically might give you a much different story as well. There's so many moving factors to consider outside of just weight alone.
A lot of people have such identity around their weight, and we have been so conditioned to beat ourselves up if we gain or lose. And so if you're gaining weight, there's a lot of inherent shame for many people in that internal dialogue. And when you can see, oh, that's water, I'm retaining fluid, it begins to, in some ways, dissipate that internal, or at least gives you something to challenge that thought, right? So I'll let you go, Bradley. You say more about that that water component.
Thank you. Well, it's fascinating. I think you were talking about an acute condition with a patient who came in and maybe lost some muscle, or the water changed within their body. Long term, if that were to continue, and somebody came in and we measured them on the InBody and they had low muscle, actually the health condition associated with having too low of muscle would be sarcopenia. So that's kind of a buzzword, a really important thing that we want to monitor and make sure that people continue to build muscle to reduce that risk of going to the nursing home, as Kathy said. But there's water
in the body, inside the cells of the bones and muscles, as well as outside of the bones and muscles in the blood, the skin, the lymphatic system. All that water is circulating through our body. And if we monitor that change, we can really get a good idea of the efficiency of somebody's metabolism. And we show a score on the result sheet that is reporting how much extracellular water you have within your total body water. So what percentage of your water is in your blood, skin, and lymphatic system? And a lot of times if I was at, say, a cardiovascular conference, somebody might call that an edema score or inflammation. And over time, when we get a baseline, we can monitor that change in water over time and get an idea of what kind of changes are happening. And I think the real power comes in it when we think about how our bodies respond to lifestyle habits, to diet, to exercise changes, to medications. And I feel like this is a tool, once it's adapted into the marketplace within a lot of pharmacies, it'll be something they won't want to do their jobs without, because it'll tell them so much more that they don't see right now.
Yeah. So if you do take one of these readings, and you look at that patient's stats, and you have things like the body fat, the lean body mass control, it's going to kind of tell you that body fat mass, the lean body mass, and then that basal metabolic rate. I thought was really interesting to be able to actually kind of take that into account when you're looking at the weight. Again, tells so much more of a story. So if you do see that metabolic rate is not ideal, how do you coach through that?
Well, the metabolic rate is what the metabolic rate is. And that is actually a function of the amount of muscle, for the most part, that is present in the body. And we have an epidemic. And to be honest, well, the reason I bought this machine was for sarcopenia. It was way before I'd even conceived of a weight loss anything. But I knew that low muscle was the driver for aging and the driver for aging poorly or well. And so I knew I couldn't really coach muscle if I didn't have a way to measure it. So much to my husband's heart attack, I bought the machine, but it really does give me the components that I need with regard to that muscle mass. So metabolic rate occurs in the mitochondria for the most part. Mitochondria, for the most part, live in muscle. So if you have a low muscle mass, you're going to have a very low metabolic rate. On the contrary, if you have a lot of muscle mass, you're going to have a much higher metabolic rate. And what I find is we've been so conditioned to eat so little that it actually will cause a famine response in the metabolism. So if you have a 2,000 calorie metabolic rate, and I always tell people this is the minimum amount of calories you need to stay warm and breathe. This is not thinking. This is not going about your day. This is not exercises. This is staying warm and breathing, basic function. But if you're not eating 2,000 of the right kind of calories, then it will throw your body into a famine response and will slow the metabolic process. So often I have to coach them to eat more and to literally fuel that process. And having that number gives me a ballpark. It gives me a ballpark to start targeting how much nutrition somebody has to eat. And trust me, that's hard coaching, because over the last 40 years, we've been groomed to think that the way you lose weight is to eat less. But that is a very short-term strategy. And my goal is not short-term. My goal is for you to live a rockin' life for a long, long time. And to do that, you have to have a machine that is well maintained and well fed. So that's what I use that metabolic rate for.
Yeah. So if I'm looking at starting a diet journey, probably the first thing I'm going to do is open up my social media, and I'll be able to find somebody that gives me a compelling argument to eat livers only, to stay fat-free, to stay carb-free, to go paleo, to go carnivore, to go Atkins, to fast, to, there's so many different, it's overwhelming, the contradictory advice that you find out there from the professionals. So, what is the hot take, Dr. Kathy, diet advice on the popular diets that tend to trend every couple years?
Well, I've been a little bit of my story. I've been morbidly obese most of my life. I was 100 pounds at 5, 200 pounds at 10, 275 when I graduated high school. My grandfather weighed 350 pounds in the Great Depression, and he was 5'10". So I've had multiple generations of morbid obesity, and what I knew is it wasn't about the food, because I was routinely eating what everybody told me, and it did not make the difference. So as I went and became a scientist and got a few degrees and started studying this, it basically comes down to metabolic function. Okay. Now, that being said, everybody's different. There's basic metabolic function. There's ATP production. There are some foundational things, and everybody's different. So what it comes down to me, and again, I said, my goal for you isn't to lose weight. My goal for you is to have optimal function for as long as you can. I want you to have a long and vital life, vitality. And if we get the biochemistry right, oh, guess what? The weight takes care of itself. I see weight as a symptom of metabolic dysfunction. So I started looking at, all right, let's look at these diets. Let's look at nutrition. Let's look at all this, which I've been studying my own for 50 years. And then I get mentored with nutritionists. So I'm digging deep everywhere I can to figure this out. The people that live the longest around the world don't exercise, and they eat a Mediterranean plant-focused diet. Plant-focused, plant and protein. Now, if you look at how we evolved, occasionally we starved, like every winter. We starved. We had to gain a lot of fat during the fall with eating all this fruit so we could survive. So there's these mechanisms that we evolved. And to be honest, we hunted and gathered for 2 million years. We've had agriculture for about 15,000 years. And in the last 50 years, we've had a catastrophic change in what humans call diet. And I think it's catastrophic on the ending of a species, catastrophic, because from the 80s on, it's no longer even a protein, starch, and a vegetable. It's nuggets and fries. It's soda. And everybody laughs at that.
Yeah.
But I like a good chicken nugget as much as anybody. It just won't populate my mitochondria and my electron transport, and it won't give me metabolic function that I want. So when I look at diets and I look at the function, you got to eat a heck of a lot of the right stuff, and predominantly it's plant and protein. Would you agree, Bradley?
Absolutely, yeah. And those things I think make the metabolism more efficient in a sense, where when people are, for instance, when we look at the result sheet, when people are having higher sodium diets or consuming more alcohol, or have less healthy habits, then they're retaining more water outside their cells. Their body's not processing efficiently, and that can even have some longer term downstream effects on other outputs we measure, like visceral fat or the reduction of the muscle mass that they have. So a lot of these outputs relate together, where we can kind of see either short-term or long-term implications of diet habits like this or exercise.
All right. That makes me put a little more emphasis day to day. With a 9-year-old daughter, it's difficult to, break that nug-centric diet because that is all she wants to eat is just some nuggets. So great to keep in mind. But let's kind of talk about where the rubber meets the road for independent pharmacy is, so many pharmacies right now are looking for ways outside of dispensing to serve their patients, both to improve their health and to battle the pressures of just increasingly low reimbursements. So how does this fit in? It's something you're passionate about, but for it to work in a business sense, it has to be something that you can monetize and scale and perform consistently. So how does that fit into a retail pharmacy? Is it something that you introduce to all of your patients? Is it something that you introduce and it brings patients in? And then what does that actually look like? Are you doing a subscription model? Is it a, pay by consult? How does that kind of organization at your pharmacy currently?
Yes to all that. I mean, at the very basic, people find it. I don't even have to market it. They often will go to InBody and find that I have one, and then they will come and get a reading, and there's a fee for service for that reading. The range, $40 to $60, I think is a pretty good range for that. I actually interpret it for them. There are many places that actually will give that to them and let them walk away. And I think you see more of that maybe in the health food, but I find that when the pharmacist actually tells them what it means, you actually get a development of a therapeutic relationship. So you start doing that. So there's that. And I actually have some colleagues that have gotten these in, and, we've been a little busy the last 4 years. So they have actually been able to pay for the machine with just that kind of advertising. They didn't even do much. They had it there. They intended to do much, but then they ended up doing 40,000 immunizations. So that kind of got us a little bit distracted. So there is that. But for me, how I have utilized it is to build programs that people want and utilize it within the program. So the biggest thing is I have a health coaching weight loss program, and I use it within the program. It's a 12-week program. They see me every 2 weeks, and I use that as part of the routine monitoring of their program. And so I think I've had 7,500 tests that I've done on this machine over the last 7 years. And what's really great is I'm now in the process of pulling the data from my program participants to see, and I'm using the data from the InBody to be that standard. That's what I'm looking at. And then I'm seeing, well, did my program work? And we're actually crunching some of that numbers to see, was a pharmacist-led lifestyle program effective? One of the most interesting things of that is that a third of the patients that did the program have continued to follow up over time. And that's not a free thing. They're paying me to continue in that coaching model or in the InBody model. And so having that longer term relationship with patients has been very valuable. So I utilize it different ways. Yes, it's cash. Yes, it's fee for service. Sometimes I'll bundle it with a consultation. Sometimes I'll do a consultation that has nothing to do with that and it, like a hormone balance. And I'll just go, let's get you up here and see what this looks like, because that will help me even better assess the hormones and where the middle-aged woman, is she sarcopenic? I need to know that, because that's going to change a little bit about what our priorities are. Are we going to work on protein first? Are we going to work on movement first? Are we going to look at testosterone, some of these other things? So I use it a lot of different ways. Now, from a financial way, what's the return, right? Well, I was trying to think about this. So I bought the machine mid-2015, and I started my weight loss program serendipitously about 4 months later, probably October, November of 15, and I've been running it ever since. And it's generated conservatively added revenue of at least $500,000 over that period of time. That's very conservative and that's very rough. Yes. And so that's added revenue. And to be honest, the profitability is 40%, 50% in those programs, maybe even a little bit higher because there's a lot of consultation dollars there or supplement. And this one's it. I do a lot of supplement sales to support those journeys.
That's what I was about to say. That's only the direct income. The indirect, can definitely add up.
Yes, and I'm routinely doing front-end sales of 15 to 20% of my business. And margins, my store margins are closer to 30%, and that's including the chaos in the back, which I'm still holding on to because I'm a pharmacist that likes to take care of people. Though it's getting harder. It is getting harder to lose money on the backside and have to work so hard on the front side to make up for that to stay in business. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a conservative direct number. Now, I'm a pharmacist that's bought a lot of stuff over the years. I know that you can buy it and it won't just do something for you. Trust me, I've got a few of those. You
Yep.
have to actually implement it. And, but as you know, this is a point of care test. This is a point of care test that actually has a billable code if I were going to bill. So charging a commiserate cash price is very doable for this. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Bradley, at all.
Yeah, Bradley, kind of a follow up on that, man. I wanted to kind of pick your brain and see what you thought about that membership model, because I don't know many gyms, for example, who offer a one-time service, like come use the treadmill for $5. That's not really the way it works, because you want that buy-in. Not only is it not profitable, but you're also not getting that commitment and the mental buy-in from the patient or the athlete or whoever it may be. So that is a little bit outside of what independent pharmacies generally do. So do you find that independent pharmacies are maybe more reluctant or less familiar with going down that path?
Absolutely. I think they're finding their way at this point because it's a model that we see in a lot of other places, like you said. And we kind of point to the tool and say it has three main components. One is to engage people, whether they're already members that you have or patients that you have, or they're coming in off the streets in your community, whether they come through our website and they say, hey, where can I find a test, or you have it marketed on your website. It's a great way to engage people. And then once they get the test done, we can then leverage that information to educate them. And you position yourself as an expert around the data, being able to facilitate a consultation with the person. And I think the power comes in the bridge that you're able to form between the education and the empowerment piece, where you can then position yourself as a resource to empower people to make changes. And if you've got a program in place, or even if somebody just wants to come back and do the test again, that's a direct return on investment. But if you've got a program like Kathy has, where she's enrolling people into a 12-month program, they become more intimate with her. And I think that helps to build the relationship of trust. And you can pivot that into a lot of other things like supplement sales, or, maybe fitness equipment sales, or as you get to know these people on a deeper level, you can include, more questions to get to know what kind of things they actually need. And then you can facilitate having those things for them available in the pharmacy to give them those options to be able to do that. And it also does have medical billing capabilities if that was a direction you wanted to go. But I would say the more popular direction people take this is to leverage it as a sales and marketing tool to convert to cash-based businesses within their practices.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many opportunities there. If I leave my physician's office, and even if they do labs where they're able to say, look, here's this set of data and things we need to improve, I still kind of know in the back of my head, yeah, I've got a year before I need to get into shape before my next checkup. I can put this off, right? But with your community pharmacist, I think there's outside of the membership, there's also that accountability aspect, because they know I'm going to see Dr. Kathy in just a couple weeks, and I want those numbers that we're looking at, those measurable images on the page to show improvement.
Absolutely.
That's a big part of it. I mean, I didn't realize how much the accountability was a positive thing for patients. And the relationship is a huge thing. I've come to the point where I really believe in this new industry time, where the technology, information is cheap, the drug is cheap and accessible. The relationship is incredibly valuable. And I think pharmacists have that, but they've never leveraged that value into a model of business that actually worked. But other industries have. And so I think it's our
conservativeness and our humbleness that has us not do that. And I think we got to get over that. I actually think there are people doing what we should be doing because they're trying, but they're not doing a very good job, or they just don't have the skills to manage medications. I mean, I have herbalists tried to take people off of medicine, or all they say is you got to get off of that. And, that can be catastrophic. And pharmacists should be involved in helping people optimize medical therapy, nutritional therapy, pharmaceutical therapy, or minimize the need. Preventive health. I mean, I really think there's a model there. It'll take a while for the insurance model to catch up there because the cartels are too entrenched in the disease model. But let me tell you, I don't want my grandchildren to just be targets of disease. I want them to be born. I want your 9-year-old daughter to have a healthy, vital, functioning body and life. And I'm telling you, food's foundational, love's foundational to that.
Yeah, I think in the pharmacy model, the data is going to dictate the future. And the data has shown, how pharmacies have performed during COVID, how independent pharmacies have measured touch points with their patients, how independent pharmacies can help prevent the bigger spends and hospital stays by managing disease states. And I think, in the next coming years, we're going to see those DIR fees get hopefully in some kind of check, and pharmacies continue to practice at a higher license outside of dispensing alone. So where do you see this being able to supplement your business specifically, like in the future? So do you see that membership model as kind of a weight loss program only? Do you see that more as kind of helping to mitigate polypharmacy? Do you see that as, kind of a new tool in examining their therapeutic regimens and looking for problems? How do you see this evolving?
I think it will do all of those things. I think I have to have the courage to step out on the business model. I know that's a challenge for all pharmacists because we're just perfectionists, and we got to know that it's going to be okay. And trust me, I've had to get therapy for all that to be even where I'm at. But to step out and do a model that is a preventive wellness model for my community and then pay me monthly to do that, I think there's something there. I also think that there are components of our care system that deals with catastrophic chronic disease that is dying for help. Okay. This frailty that is taking over our society at late 50s, early 60s, and then this slodge to the end, the slow, terrible death because of bone loss and muscle loss and then dementias. I think there is a piece of this that says, can't we do better?
Yeah.
Can't we do better? And then you throw the polypharmacy and the negative impact of the drugs. And I think, again, my job has always been to make sure the drugs have the best outcome. And if they're hurting people, I felt it was compelled that it was my professional duty to do something about that. And again, the best way I do is to have people not need them, to question why they're on it, question and identify the negative outcomes, negative side effects, and to try to help them not have that. So I think there's a piece. I don't know that they're going to see pharmacy as the solution, though. I don't think we've marketed ourselves well enough with our expertise, and I don't think we're structured currently right now to receive those patients. We might be able to fill the prescriptions, but we don't have the ability to sit down, make an appointment, and do something about it. And one of the things that COVID gave us was this new concept of an appointment in the pharmacy with COVID shots. And I challenge every pharmacist listening, if you don't have an appointment for a pharmacist consultation on that appointment calendar, you need to. And you need to have a dollar sign associated with it. And it needs to be a dollar sign commiserate with your value and your education. So that's not, and I always not jokingly say it needs to be more than a plumber, right? So we have to be able to receive this change.
Yeah.
And so pharmacy has to step up and start looking differently and acting differently than just dispensing. And as hard as it is, I have to stop spending my time on prescriptions that lose money and start spending my time on this kind of initiative to be able to situate. It's not my time, my staff's time, right? I have to create an environment where I can receive these patients and then do my clinical due diligence and then make that recommendation and help them along the way. So I think we've got two issues. This is going to change, but we've got to be positioning and marketing ourselves as a profession to step up and be that solution.
Yeah, that's so interesting because, while pharmacists are struggling to get paid from their traditional revenue models, so many independent pharmacies do feel like they give away so much of their value. And, they tend to say, my customers won't pay for that. I can't ask for that. And people are willing to pay. Like some of the podcasts that I listen to have Patreons where members who just appreciate that content pay, right? Like that's part of kind of the way we're wired is, we do want to help, and pay for the services that we appreciate and show our appreciation that way. So Bradley, that's one of the things that I saw on the InBody website was there were some like resources to kind of help the pharmacy so that you're not feeling around in the dark with that kind of setting up that business model. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a service business at heart, and we're here to help people implement the tool. And when somebody makes a purchase and it gets out to them, we're going to hold their hand to make sure that they get it up and running and their staff is trained on how to use it and support them along the way to facilitate any type of questions that they have. And also lean on professionals within the field like Dr. Kathy to be able to help them get the return on investment that they want from, actual practical experience. So we're definitely open to helping people as much or as little as they want, but a lot of times we're able to really change the game for people in the way that they see the tool and see their business also around the metrics that come with it. And I think Kathy hit on it really well when she said having a consultation for the pharmacist is going to be probably the first place to start with this tool, where you can bring the InBody in, and there's probably a lot of conversations that you're already having where you're going to be able to direct traffic to a consultation. It might happen in the aisles, it might happen at the counter, but people are going to ask questions that might be fitting for you to sit down with them and spend a little more quality time with them. And I think if you work on developing that consultation, you'll also be able to work on developing the things on the other side of it. So it's just a matter of taking the time to spend a little more time with them. But then also, I feel like a lot of times when somebody does bring it in, a challenge that they might have is not having the appropriate staff to be able to facilitate it because there's too much going on, and this is a lot more to try to facilitate. So I feel like in some instances, it's a matter of finding the right person on your team or, bringing a new employee in to be able to support a program like this to help make it successful.
Yeah, so many times, we come back to the efficiencies and the MedSync programs that kind of build in that appointment-based model, because there's so many questions that you may have for a patient that wouldn't even come up in the "do you have any questions about this drug" counseling format, where when you do have that appointment-based model and you're able to get the patient to ask one question, a lot of times that may bring 3 more questions that they would have never asked if you didn't, carve out that time and make that interaction a little stickier anyways.
What if it was just a standard part of the care where it wasn't a question, it was just a matter of you're here as a patient and everybody that comes in here gets this consultation and sits down and does this body composition analysis. It's complementary to help us get to know you and improve your therapeutic outcomes. Look at the sync of all your medications and your lifestyle and your diet and your exercise and see if we can provide anything else to help you. An open door invitation might just be the place to start.
Yeah. Yeah. And we see that like so often with, that appointment-based model where you see, hey, this is a Part D patient and, open enrollment's coming up where, hey, they've added a new medication and I want to do like a little, a mini comprehensive review with this patient. There's so many opportunities that come, but definitely having that time carved out seems important.
It doesn't have to be all day. It can be often, a very short conversation, but a pointed conversation that they've never had with anybody else. And, last year when I spoke at Pioneer, it was on selling health. And what I said is I'm an aggressive problem solver. And that's really all Bradley's speaking to. It's what I speak to. That's what sales is identifying a problem and offering a solution, not cramming a solution down their throat, but to offer the solution and give them education. But the problems I solve, they don't even know they have. Yeah. Chronic heart disease or pre-dementia or all this stuff that I don't want them to have, that with my knowledge know that most of the people walking in my pharmacy, or because I know their med list, I know the situation that they're in. So I have opportunities to solve problems and provide the solutions. And, it might be protein powder. It may be a conversation about eggs. It may be all this stuff. And to find that solution, and that's where you build therapeutic relationships, but that's where you also build a business model that's sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. And that stickiness in that relationship that, when they do have a question, they're coming to Dr. Kathy, not Dr. Google every time.
And I've got them where they call and make an appointment. They just call and make an appointment. They don't even come in to talk to me because they know people want my contribution. And so now I've got the structure where they just call. And they're told by somebody else what the cost is. And so I don't have to manage that. And they are then given the choice, and they powerfully choose or they powerfully don't choose. And I'm not getting all emotional about either one, right? I'm just focusing on the solutions that I know. I'm developing my clinical skills and then trying to help them navigate their life in a great way.
That's something too that I experienced when we were at the NCPA conference and talking to other pharmacies. It seemed like they had trouble selling, right? In the sense of like making a sale without any type of like a prompt or, feeling like it's challenging to sell things from maybe behind the counter. And Kathy just said when somebody schedules an appointment with you, someone else is doing it for you. That sounds like maybe an important piece that helped you be able to expand this program within your practice.
Yeah, there's definitely like a reluctance to seem like you're upselling. I remember, in high school working at a retail in the mall where we had a loyalty program, and you had to deliver the loyalty program, and most of the customers that came in had their guard up for upselling at that point of sale anyways. And every now and then I'd half-heartedly go through my spiel and somebody would say yes, and I'm like, really? You want to sign up for this? But that upsell at the point of sale is something that it's sometimes easier to do it elsewhere. And especially now that, during COVID, there have been so many scheduling solutions that pharmacies have been able to implement, based on their website, from the RX Local website. There's a few different resources that have really kind of changed the game in that manner as well.
I feel like too, within the pharmacy, you can pre-frame a lot of these programs and offerings by creating an engaging environment where it's obvious that you are creating a coaching program and people are seeing information about it, or you're giving them facts about their health, whether it's on flyers on the wall or digital marketing, where questions will naturally come up. So it's not necessarily you have to create the upsell to the value program, but they're naturally coming and saying, hey, what's this program? Or, hey, I see this scale over here. What is this thing going to do for me? And that's the moment when you would be able to pivot those conversations. I never upsell. I upsolve. Okay. I upsolve because whenever, and you see this all the time in our pharmacies, somebody comes in for their mother who needs a waterless shampoo cap, right? And all you have to do is say, hey, what's she do? What's going on? Oh, we're bringing her from the hospital. Well, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? Am I upselling, or am I just making her life so much easier by telling her what I think she needs to know, right?
Yeah.
And then she has the opportunity to know that we carry those solutions, and that if she needs anything else, she can come to us for that kind of consult, right? So I don't see it as selling at all. I see it as my responsibility of a pharmacist to have my patients have great outcomes by telling them everything I know and providing a quality product. You know, pharmacists, we know how to vet a product, but your patients are going other places, and those products aren't necessarily, actually the research says they're not good. And so now, are we dealing with a disease, or are we dealing with toxic products? So for me, it was very important for me, for my wellness of my community, that I had a vetted, reliable solution for them. Okay. And so I don't see it as sales. Maybe I should. I'd probably be better off. But I see it as part of my professional ethical duty to take care of my patient.
Yeah, and we see that in other areas of our life. You know, if I go to an auto parts store because I'm, working on my car, and, the guy at the counter says, hey, you want to make sure you replace that gasket while you're in there. That's not an upsell. That's helpful, professional knowledge that he's sharing with an appreciative customer. And it happens to benefit both parties. And, I love those win-win scenarios anytime you can encounter those.
I've been nagging my patients for 20 years on vitamin D. 20 years. I had seen the research, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is in my bailiwick. We need to be making sure people are okay. I want them to get their lab work. I want to help them. And there are people alive, given the last pandemic, because of that, right? So again, exactly what you're saying. It's not selling. It's actually taking care of your community, and really taking care on a new level these clients that are coming to you, and the drugs aren't working. They're not really working to produce the kind of health we want. The chronic health is rampant. We have 75% of the population that is obese or overweight. They're not working to produce health. We've got to start looking somewhere else. And I think the pharmacist is perfectly situated and educated to be able to implement this.
Yeah. Can you imagine, how we got to the mindset of, hey, we're going to spend, a healthy family is going to spend, $1,000 a month on health insurance because in case we get sick, because we're going to get sick, right? Like as such a way to mitigate the risk instead, the financial risk of what's inevitably coming, instead of taking that proactive expense at the beginning. Just imagine if healthcare overall just kind of shifted that mindset to a proactive approach of prevention. Could be very different.
Well, I often say that if I could get 7 to 10 servings of vegetables into you, for 2 weeks, I will profoundly change your life. And everybody laughs at me. They just laugh like that's a ridiculous statement. But $20,000 a month on an autoimmune therapy is not ridiculous, right?
Sure.
So if I took that $1,000 and put $500 into diet, maybe even had somebody come to my house and make it at $500 a month, I think we could begin to shift this. Now, the disease system that we have, insurance system, won't shift it. It's going to be an individual system. It's our patients that are going to shift it if they are empowered and knowledgeable. And to me, this machine was a game changer in me going in this direction. And Bradley, would you talk about the other industries that are doing this that you partner with? I mean, there are people that don't know near as much as we do that are doing this with this machine in their businesses. So Absolutely. This is not new. Yeah. Well, I think within major medical centers and hospitals, the tool is used in many specialties to look at their therapeutic outcomes of a lot of different modalities. Lots of direct primary care clinics are bringing InBodies in, functional medicine practitioners, aesthetic medicine, obviously fitness centers and gyms are doing it to help with transformation, nutrition, dietitians. I think probably one of the most fascinating ones recently, I've had the opportunity to help build out a network of dentists who are bringing in the technology, because the dental office of the future is going to be testing to look for things like visceral fat or low muscle or downstream effects of cardiometabolic conditions with carotid artery thickness measurements. And they're testing the saliva within the mouth and the gums, because the plaque that's in your mouth downstream ends up at the plaque that's in your arteries and causes heart attack. So I think that the pharmacist is equally well positioned to do any number of those tests as well at the point of care, closer to the point of care, where I've even heard of pharmacists who are going to work in these other locations rather than, patients going to the pharmacy. The pharmacist is going to work within the environment where the care is happening, and they're able to make a bigger impact too.
Oh, wow.
And supplement companies, right? Or supplement.
For sure. Yeah, supplement stores, 100%. Yeah, every time somebody comes in the store, that's the first thing they're doing is having them measure their body composition, because it's going to help them increase their supplement sales. It's shown just by having a body composition analyzer, doing the test, your sales are going to go up 10, 15%.
Wow. Well, we're closing up on time here. Been here about an hour, so I need to let you guys get back to work before too long. Dr. Kathy, I'll be seeing you very soon in Nashville, Tennessee. You'll be speaking at Pioneer RX Connect this year. Tell me a little bit about what you're going to be teaching this year in Nashville.
Well, last year we did a really great podcast or talk on selling health. I think it's going to be Selling Health 2.0. I think we're going to build on that conversation and really look at what that looks like and what our barriers are, and just keep digging in. So if anybody hasn't seen that I would encourage them to review that talk. I think you guys have it up somewhere on the site. But I think that's a good place to start, because there's a lot of barriers and they're almost all between our ears. And as an identity of a pharmacist, that has to be very conservative and 100% correct in our professional doings. It's sometimes very counterintuitive to go out on something you don't know the outcome of and that you're going to fail at reliably 70% of the time. And that's a hard thing to balance. And so I'm just going to continue to build on that conversation and empower the pharmacists to keep going in this direction.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait. Bradley, thank you so much for joining us. If somebody does want to learn more about the InBody devices, where should they go? Who should they reach out to?
InBody.com. Best place to go. Our website is an amazing resource with so much information. So stop on by there. If you want to speak to somebody, just put it in inquiry form and somebody will reach out to you right away.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining me. Great podcast today talking about weight loss, and we didn't mention Ozempic once.
It only works as an adjunct to diet and exercise. You know that, right?
All right, guys. I'll see you all this summer, I'm sure.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond the Scripts, presented by the Catalyst Pharmacy Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please support our channel by liking, subscribing, and clicking the notification bell so that you'll be notified anytime we post new content. To stay up to date with all of the latest independent pharmacy news and content, follow Pioneer RX on your preferred social media platform.